I'm digital anchor Andre Ash with the Michigan Chronicle, and welcome to our community series here, where we're shining a spotlight on an ongoing conversation about police reform and the ongoing tensions between law enforcement and the urban community, and particularly African Americans. And how do we bridge that gap? And how do we also have a conversation that needs to be had about the role of Black men in America and the positive roles they're playing, and how do we influence and grow our influence in impacting the lives of more young Black men so they don't run into unfortunate encounters with law enforcement, and also how does that police reform look as well? That's a conversation topic that always keeps coming up. So post George Floyd, where do we go from here? I'm glad to have two outstanding young brothers who have been doing outstanding community service for quite some time. We got 36-year radio veteran Reggie Reg Davis. He is also the president of Ceasefire Youth Initiative. Reggie Reg, thanks for being here.
Hello, Mr. Dre. Thanks for having me today. Can't wait to get this conversation started.
I also got Ray Winans, business and community leader here in Detroit. Ray, thanks for joining me.
You know what, Andre, thank you for having me. It's good to see my brother Reggie Reg on here. So I know we got some good things going, man. So I'm excited about this. Thanks again.
I want to go back a little bit and let's talk a little bit about the George Floyd verdict, because we all watched the viral video and the officer now has been found guilty, charged with murder. As a Black man, how did you see that video? How did you take the verdict? A full circle. We're almost a year to the day of that incident. Ray.
For me, seeing the video of George Floyd, man, I mean, just like it still leave me speechless, right? It was traumatic to say the least, right? And as far as the verdict, man, it's just that, you know, I still personally, I'm still waiting on the sentencing. You know, one of the things that I couldn't help but to think, even though, you know, he's been found guilty of murder, he's currently incarcerated. It's this personal part of me that just hope and pray that they give him the same amount of attention like they do any other young Black boy that's committed and convicted for homicide, right? Making sure he's on suicide watch. Don't let him take the easy way out. The first thing I thought about, it's like, this man's probably going to kill himself to take the easy way out. No, give him every resource, every med that allows him to go through this process. And I want to know what the sentence is. I mean, like, that's what I'm waiting on. I'm thankful for the verdict, but I don't have any faith in the sentencing. That's being completely honest.
Reggie Reg, what's your take? You know, you've been a part of the community and certainly the community all across this country, but in particular, the African American community have been incensed about over and over police encounters that end in the death of young Black men and women. What was your take on the video of George Floyd and also the verdict?
So, Andre, what I got was, as soon as I saw this European, this white man being hauled away with his hands behind his back in handcuffs, on his way to serve time for doing what I can say heinous crime, but that doesn't even, you know, take the case. What this guy did was, I'm going to say, I actually stood up and applauded, because when I saw him being hauled away in handcuffs, in my mind, the next picture I got was a picture of the young Emmett Till and how his mother said, you know what? No, I don't want to cover him up. Let's show him what they did to my son. This young 14-year-old whistled at a white woman and they beat him to death like that. Pictures like that came in my head, and then another picture came up, and I said the next thing that rang out of my head was, can we all just get along? And then I started to see, you know, vivid pictures of Black men, boys and men, who are treated worse than a dog. You know, a white man treats his dog better than he treats a Black man. The Black man in today's society is one who has to be careful, because I think in a blink of an eye, if we make the wrong move next, there will be no black man. Let's imagine that. Andre, if you take the natural order, God says that the man, I'm gonna say black man, is supposed to be the head of his household, the leader of his community. He's supposed to be, for these young black boys, very instrumental in what they're going to turn out to be. So I just say it to answer your question. When I saw that white man being hauled away, I was thankful that it didn't go the other way, because every major urban city, including Detroit, would have been burned down to the ground. Right now, we'd be looking outside and nothing but smoke. So I'm thankful that didn't happen.
I want to talk about the burning things down, which thankfully didn't happen here in Detroit. We have a history that goes back to us already having experienced that time before in the 1960s. But to protest, we did have, and protests that were that carried out all across this country in almost every urban city. But Ray, I know you was a part of that protest, but also the community activism and the leadership that worked with our Detroit Police Department to ease those tensions. How important is that relationship that our community still needs to have with law enforcement moving forward from here?
So for me, I had a couple media outlets reach out to me and ask me in response to the verdict, like, Ray, are you prepared? Like, if this verdict isn't, and I'm being quite honest, I was like, if they don't find this man guilty, then my hands are tied, right? Like, I'm not getting involved, right? Like, because for me, it's either you're ready for peace or you're ready for war. At the time that it happened, I knew that our community needed peace, right? Detroit. And so, yes, it was easy to stand in the gap and make that decision because we need peace. Had they would have found him not guilty, it would have been time for war. And that's just being honest, right? Like, it would have been, and I wouldn't have, I have to be completely honest. Nothing against DPD, but again, if they would have not found him guilty, it would have been time for war, man. Because it would have been unacceptable. And that's just being
I want to respond to that, Ray, because a lot of law enforcement agencies, they would say that, they dispatch their officers or squad teams or officers into high crime districts. Some will argue that, well, there's already war happening on the streets of urban America. And so when you have officers who are responding to whether it's a volatile situation or a traffic stop, I know both of you have had involvement when it comes to trying to mend the fences of gang relations in our community. Positive work you both have been doing, but I mean, Reggie Reg, you have an interesting story. Your brother was a victim of violence, yet you still have a profound take when it comes to policing in our country, because how do you respond to people who say we need to defund the police department? You have an interesting take on that.
Yeah, and my brother Vito Davis, rest in peace, he was assassinated in 2001, a 19-year-old man, graduated from Denby High School, was on his way to Eastern Michigan University on a basketball scholarship, and he lost his life from young men, between the ages of 13 and 20, his peers. So I like to talk about how, in Detroit and in Michigan, we don't experience the same type of things that they do in North Carolinas and the Texas and the Missouris and these other these states. I actually take my hat off to the Michigan State Police in the way that they handle their business. The Detroit Police Department, from my brother, they were always there. Johnny on the spot. They're good people to this day. They're just not like those other police. And it's amazing that our situation here in Detroit is really not about the police shooting us while we're walking away with no weapon in our back. They don't. That's not what Michigan is known for. What our situation is in Detroit, which is the mecca of Black America, this city of the Detroit, the biggest black city in this country, we have an issue with guns and killing each other. That's where our issue lies. So when they say defund the police, I think the person that said that, Andre, the first person that said off their tongue, defund the police, I don't think they were really thinking about what they wanted to say. I think their emotions were wrapped all around that idea, because there's no way in hell that we're gonna defund the police. Because what's that movie? Ray, I'm just sure you watched it. It was out about 5-10 years ago. A movie called Purge, where every night from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. next morning, whatever, the police go away, like literally
They
leave.
talk about chaos on the streets without the police.
So could you imagine that if you defund the police, that's what would happen, and this country would go to.
But Ray, do you look at that? Do you see the narrative or the rhetoric that's some throughout in Black Lives Matter about defunding the police? Do you see it the same way? Some would say is, well, take some money and reappropriate it to programs that help people before police are needed in certain situations.
So when people say defund the police, I personally agree with what Reggie Reg said. I think the word defund is not the appropriate use of the word, right? Do resources need to be heavily invested in communities and reallocated? Yes. I believe that so it's two models, right? It's two ways you're going to approach this issue of violence, either from a public health approach or a public safety approach. Whereas one of them, a public health approach, is you want an individual to be healthy. You recognize that each individual who 9 times out of 10, which the science and the CDC has published articles on this, when a person commits a violent act, 9 times out of 10, that person had already been a victim of violence, right? So understanding and recognize that violence is a sickness and a disease, just like the corona, and it's transferable, just like AIDS or HIV. With a public safety approach, you take the approach of locking an individual up without no regard to the environment in which they was raised, without no resources. The only resources they get is a prison. So I challenge us often when we talk about individuals, quote unquote, who have done harm to other individuals. What proper resources are we giving these individuals, right, to prevent that, right? And so when we think in terms of police funding, right, I believe that the police is overfunded, right? I believe that they're for our communities, right? Because the police can't make our neighborhoods safe, right? In order to stop shootings, the individuals in the neighborhood has to make a decision to say that they're going to stop and that the community is going to be safe. And so is programs the way? Yes. Right? Is mental health services the way? Yes. Do it take the police to make the community safe? No, because the police aren't the ones that's making it unsafe with shootings and things like that. So it has to start with programming. Yes.
So you can talk about funding that needs to be had for social programs, less or more funding that's needed for the police, if you will. Maybe it's more training, because I think this is an ongoing conversation about what police reform looks like. But nonetheless, you said that police can't stop crime or someone from shooting. But nonetheless, some police agencies will argue, but they are still there to enforce the law. Let's go back to the Columbus shooting of the young 16-year-old girl, and the police officer had 9 seconds to respond from her attempting to attack and bodily injure, harm, or kill the other young woman who she had pinned in the corner. Some would say the officer was damned if he did, damned if he didn't, right? So from a journalistic perspective, I always want to look at these police-involved shootings individually, case by case.
Thank you.
What do we have to do as a community, though, to arm ourselves with, in certain instances, the police are doing their job, although it may not look good in how it was done. Reggie?
So you got the narrative is, a police pulls up. As soon as he gets out the car, he's answering a call where somebody's erratic, saying, these girls are fighting, come on over. He pulls up and he sees one young lady. She's just erratic. Pushed one girl on the sidewalk, and then she had another girl on the car, and she goes back, takes a long knife, not a little bit. That knife was huge, and she was going towards the girl. So the cop had all of 1.0 seconds to decide what the heck he was going to do. His job is to save lives, protect. But he's got a situation where one individual is getting ready to be stabbed and could die from those injuries, and the other one, what am I going to do? Am I going to shoot her to get her out the way? What am I going to do? He decided to shoot her 4 times. She fell out. She died. So every 2 sides are mad, upset. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? My thing is this: when you talk about defunding the police, and like you say, Ray, they may be overfunded right now because they got a lot of funds in places they shouldn't be. So definitely reorchestrate where those funds are. And me and my team have sat down and talked about how when you defund the police, let's talk about it, because if you remember another situation, fellas, where I think it was a white female cop who was walking up to a car with a young black man, and he did something and she was startled. So she went real fast and grabbed something and shot it. She said it was her stun gun. She thought it was her stun gun, but it was the gun, and she killed him. That can't happen. How the hell? How can that? So what we talked about was, with the defunding for the police department, let's get a group of guys or get somebody, that young minds, I don't know, genius engineers, whatever, and let's come up with a one particular weapon. You can't have both of them. Over in China and many Asian countries, they don't have no weapons, the police. But I don't want to go there. But let's get one weapon that when you shoot it, they're not these bullets that will kill you. There'll be something, I don't want to say rubber or wooden or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. But what it would do, instead of penetrating the body and taking someone's life, it will do what the stun gun does. So it'll be a gun that the police will reach for. That they're going too fast. It's only one weapon, and when you shoot it, it won't kill the person. I mean, this is crazy, and I know some people listen to what I'm saying, and the NRA is like, man, get out of here, turn the page on me. But we have to start.
At this point, I think all ideas are on the table as far as how do we police and police our neighborhoods, our communities. But I want to get to this point as well, because going back to that Columbus shooting situation with the young teenager wielding the knife, you had her dad, a black male adult who was standing near, and after the officer shot, he said, "Hey, you shot my daughter." Yet we can also see him pushing another young woman in the body cam footage just before the officer shot. Mm-hmm. Many people would say, you know what, this young girl was failed before police even arrived. She was living in a foster care system, and she could perhaps have been more safe inside the home than out fighting with these young ladies outside. But the role of the black male is what I want to get to, because some would say, you know what, you shouldn't blame the victim, this young girl. It is what it is. But then there's also the conversation about accountability for our own. Right.
So you know what, Andre, like, so let me say this: that decision that officer made, it was going to impact somebody one way or another. Like my brother Reggie Reg said, had he not did it, the father was like, y'all let somebody be like, hey, y'all let my daughter get killed, right? So that decision was made. But for us as black men in the community, I personally feel like we have a moral responsibility to our communities to lead by example on what relationships are supposed to look like, right? Not to be fearful, not to be timid, not to be swaying, but to really be stand up as men, right? And no different from the young men I was working with today. You have to deal with accountability and responsibility. The only people that I personally know that just don't want to have a conversation with the police, right, or a relationship, and I'm not saying from an informant lens or none of that, but just a mutual respect, is the person that's committing crime, right? Even some criminals want to have relationships, right? Like someone be like, man, you know what, the police did a good job. But us as black men, we have to grab that bull by the horn, right? It's our responsibility, nobody else's, right? It's not nobody else's responsibility. When we're doing a good job at it. Like Andre, like I'm gonna asset frame. We have men, and I can only speak for our community here in the city of Detroit. The black men in this community, man, I take my hat off to these men. A lot of men in our community step up, rise to the occasion. You got guys like Reggie Reg, New Era Detroit, I mean, guys who all these black men in our community step up and rise to the occasion. And that's one of the things that I'm grateful for in this city. You know, the black men do lead the way. Yes, we have incidents. No, we can't solve everything. But for the mass majority of the black men in this community, man, Andre, I'm betting my dollar, man, that the black men step up, man. I ain't talking about the boys, but the men, the black men step up in this community, man. Even the ones I don't like, but I gotta respect. Yeah. They step up.
All right, and you've been a part of that, Reggie Reg. I got to give you the final thoughts on this one. The role of black men in our community.
Well, if you look at the black person, the black family, we go way back in history. We are the kings and queens of this earth. It started with us. Now, don't let me go too deep because I want to talk about how, you know, Jesus looks like us. But my point is this, that being the case, you know, we came over here and we built this country, my man. That was us that did that. On the ships, nobody could last on that long journey over anybody else would die off, you know, from diseases and that. We were strong because we built like that. And they knew that. So they made us the slave. My point is this, that being the case, if we black people are the kings and queens, you know, the dawn of earth, the case in point, the black woman, God's greatest creation. That's a fact. That's not just opinion. Therefore, if this is the family that is the dominant, not the recessive, but the dominant in life, then the man who, as I said earlier, the natural the order says that the man is the head of his household. The man is the leader of his community. That's beautiful that we had a bunch of women the last 5-10 years making it to U.S. Congress and the city, this and then all these positions. That's a beautiful thing. And I commend women. But let's not lose sight of the black man, because that's what we're starting to do, Andre. And that's what we need to focus on, how we can revamp that and pay attention to the black man and let him have that seat where he belongs, because we're falling off that seat.
Yeah. I think this is an important conversation that we're having, and then one that we continue to need to have. And more young people need to see more black men as inspirations and people to look up to, rather than unfortunate outcomes that end in their death by the hands of police. An ongoing conversation we'll continue to have. Reggie Reg Davis, 37-year radio veteran, and also 36. Okay, I'm not going to put too many more years ahead of you. Radio veteran and president of Ceasefire Youth Initiative, and our brother Ray Winans, business and community leader here in Detroit. Appreciate the both of you.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Andre, and thanks for hosting this, Reg. I love you, brother. Keep fighting the good fight, man.